Hello, I'm Janice Poplack, Director of Social Work at the Menninger Clinic, and I'm here with Dr. Jon Allen, Senior Psychologist at the Menninger Clinic and Professor of Psychiatry at Baylor College of Medicine. Dr. Allen has lectured and written extensively on the subject of attachment, which is the subject of our podcast today. Hi, Dr. Allen.
Hi.
Good to see you.
You too.
Thank you. So we're going to discuss attachment, and tell us what is an attachment relationship.
Okay, well, think of attachment as a kind of bond that holds people together. Except we're talking about an emotional bond with attachment, and the prototype that I think most of us have in mind for this bond is a mother-baby relationship, where the baby is distressed and the mom comes and holds the baby, soothes the baby, and helps the baby feel comfortable and calm down. So that's the essence of an attachment relationship. But I want to emphasize from the start that although we think of moms and babies and children and so forth, we all need attachment relationships throughout life, and that's really what I want to talk about.
Well, what does it mean to be securely attached?
Okay, when you're securely attached, that means that you are confident that when you're distressed or hurting or ill or threatened, that when you reach out to somebody for care, that they're going to be reasonably available and reasonably responsive emotionally and kind of tuned in and connected and caring. So attachment is always in the context of caregiving. So it's confidence in the relationship that makes for security.
Well, then what purposes does attachment serve?
Okay, well, if we go back a little bit, John Bowlby was the father of attachment theory, and his first thought was that attachment developed in mammals mainly for the protection of offspring. So if the offspring were separated from the mother, they instinctively let out a cry, and the mother instinctively comes to kind of bring them back into the nest, so to speak. So this provides protection and safety. Protection, for example, from predators. Okay, in us humans, attachment serves also this protective function to a degree. I mean, a parent will run after they see their child running toward the street. They're going to grab them and, hold them so that they're safe. But mostly when we think about attachment, we're thinking about it provides a feeling of security, a feeling of safety, and again provides a sense of relief and comfort in the face of distress. There is more recent thinking in attachment theory, though, that's really important, and that is that it's in attachment relationships that's kind of the foundation for social learning. So how we learn about relationships and people.
Can you say more about social learning? Okay,
well, we take for granted that we can understand each other reasonably well. Although, we can't always take it for granted because sometimes we're downright bewildered about, how could he have done that or how could I have done that? But think that our behavior is based on very complex psychological states, that we have different feelings, we have different beliefs, we have different goals, desires, needs, and so forth. So it's like there's this complicated mental equipment that we have that leads us to act in various ways. And plus, each of us has a complex history that we bring to bear on our actions. So to understand each other requires a long period of learning. And attachment relationships, these early attachment relationships, they're the relationships in which we start to learn about other people, about relationships, and not just about other people, but ourselves, because a lot of what we come to understand about ourselves is based on other people's responses to us. So, for example, the caregiver will signal to the baby or to the child something about what she or he perceives is going on. Or in families, talk about emotions. Well, how were you feeling? Here's what I thought you were feeling. So this is how we learn about not just other people, but actually ourselves. We kind of learn about ourselves from the outside in.
Well, then what makes attachment so important for mental health?
Well, if we go back to the idea that attachment is our fundamental way of coming to feel emotionally secure and safe, I think that's at the core of mental health and a sense of well-being. It's a really interesting experiment done by a psychologist, Jim Cohn, at the University of Virginia, that really stands out in my mind. What he did sounds a little diabolical. Okay, he recruited satisfied married couples, and he brought the couple into the lab, and then he exposed the woman in the couple to electric shocks periodically. So she's in this situation where periodically she's going to be shocked. Now, there's 3 conditions in the experiment. In one condition, she could hold her husband's hand as she was undergoing this threat. On another condition, she could hold the experimenter's hand, a stranger. And then in the 3rd condition, she couldn't hold anyone's hand. Now, they studied patterns of brain activity as she was experiencing this threat. What they found was really interesting. The brain was least active when she was holding her husband's hand. In other words, the brain was generating less emotionally distressing kind of activity, and moreover, when the brain is like undergoing this emotional stress, there are also efforts in the brain to regulate and rein in and control that distress. So the brain is active in producing and regulating the stress, which is a lot of brain effort, actually. So the conclusion is that if you're feeling connected to somebody who you feel secure with and trust, that this takes a huge load off your brain. I actually wrote a little blog post for the Menninger blog called "Attach and Give Your Brain a Break." So the point of this study is that our most potent and efficient way of regulating emotional distress is to be connected with another person whom you trust.
But isn't it a problem to be emotionally dependent?
I'm glad you asked that question because it's kind of a conundrum. So here's the story. John Bowlby emphasized this kind of what he called the safe haven of attachment. This is, you think of the mama mammal, going out and rescuing her offspring and bringing the offspring to safety. That's one piece of attachment. But I think of Mary Ainsworth as, if John Bowlby is the father, Mary Ainsworth is the mother of attachment theory. She was a psychologist who was a researcher, and she observed that toddlers, what they would do is they would kind of toddle away or scurry away from the mom, exploring the environment, whether it's in a laboratory or in the home, always checking back to make sure that the mom or the caregiver is there. So she called this the secure base of attachment. It's really important because this secure base provides a kind of platform for the infant or the toddler to go out and explore the world. So the point is that when the child feels safe and secure, they're more capable of going out in the world and exploring and learning. So actually their ability to depend on the caregiver fosters a kind of independence because they're confident that if they run into trouble, they're going to be able to resolve it and get the help they need. So actually children who are securely attached appear to be most independent.
So what is insecure attachment?
Okay, if we think of secure attachment as confidence that the caregiver, the person you rely on, is going to be available and responsive, insecurity develops when that's not the case. Now, it's quite simple because there are 2 things you can do when you're insecure. One thing you can do is kind of cling harder. It's called ambivalent attachment. It's ambivalent because there's a desire for connection, but a sense of frustration and maybe deprivation, that you really want to make sure, boy, if you're going to get your needs met, you have to kind of make a fuss in order to do it and stay close to the attachment figure. Okay, so that's one thing you can do if this consistent responsiveness is not forthcoming. The other thing you can do is decide, okay, I'm going to manage on my own. If I'm hurting, I'll deal with it, and I'm not going to seek out comfort when I'm feeling threatened. That's called avoidant attachment.
So how early do we become attached?
Well, attachment develops in the first year of life, and mostly in the second half of the first year of life. The interesting thing to me is that this Mary Ainsworth developed this laboratory situation where you have a kind of separation and reunion. The mom leaves the baby in the playroom with a stranger and then alone, comes back. Secure attachment, they make a good connection so that the baby is distressed when the mom leaves and baby's happy when the mom comes back, moves toward the mom moves toward the baby and comforts the baby and so forth. Then the baby goes back to play. Okay. So by 1 year of age, that pattern is clearly evident. Now, in the same situation, so is insecure attachment. That some babies, when the mom comes back, she might pick the baby up, but the baby be fussy, maybe even kind of push away the mom in anger or frustration. That's kind of the ambivalent pattern. Or you see some of these 1-year-olds will actually, mom comes back, they act cool, calm, and collected, and they don't rely on her at all. So the interesting thing to me is that by 1 year of age, that these children have figured out what's the best strategy to relate to a caregiver when you're feeling distressed by 1 year of age, before language is really on board.
Well, how do these different attachment styles develop?
Well, let me just give you a couple of examples. The ambivalent style could develop, say, with inconsistent caregiving, so that sometimes the caregiver is available and sometimes not. Or the caregiver may respond only when you kind of ratchet up the distress. Or like, well, I can get mom or dad to pay attention if I climb a tree and dangle from a branch. I mean, I'm kind of exaggerating. But learn that, okay, this is the way to get my needs met. The avoidance strategy could develop, for example, when the parent consistently rebuffs the child's bids for comfort when distressed, kind of sending a message, look, I'm happy to be with you, but boy, not when you're crying, not when you're hurting. It's kind of, they learn not to be a bother. So it has to do with the caregiving. And see, the same infant might relate in a securely attached way to one parent and be insecure with another. This is this very early social learning.
Yes, and you said that this develops by the age of 1. Does that change?
Well, yes, it changes, absolutely. Sometimes I say in patient education groups that if attachment couldn't change, we may as well close the doors to this clinic. And it does change, and it changes in fairly predictable ways. That is, let's say you have a secure attachment, say with mom. But then something happens in the mom's relationships that leads her to feel threatened or insecure, or say she's ill or develops a psychiatric disorder or gets depressed or something like that. Something that interrupts the relationship then could move the child from feeling relatively secure to feeling more insecure. And conversely, a child who is insecure, then when the parent becomes more available and responsive, can move to security. So this is a very hopeful idea because we see the flexibility in attachment that is evident in the first year of life. And so what we need to do is work on relationships so that basically people become more consistently available and responsive to each other in those periods of distress. That's the key.
So it's best to have a secure attachment.
Well, I would qualify that. Yes, we do need secure attachment relationships, because if you go back to the hand-holding, it's like this is the most potent way that we have of managing distress. But we also need flexibility, because it wouldn't make sense to behave in a secure way with everybody. It doesn't make sense to reach out to people who are not going to be responsive and helpful and caring. So we need to learn these different strategies. We need to learn sometimes you need to make more of a fuss if you're going to get somebody to meet your needs. Sometimes it's best to keep some emotional distance to preserve the relationship. So it's these adaptations to the conditions of the relationship that I think that's really the strength of attachment, is flexibility. But we do most need, I think, some secure relationships.
So finally, our final question is, how is attachment important in treatment?
Well, it's really important. A lot of treatment, and there's nothing wrong with it, it's very good. It helps people sort of manage emotional distress. Cognitive therapy, dialectical behavior therapy. These are meditation. These are skills that people can learn to manage their emotional distress. That's all to the good. But attachment is a complement to that. Because attachment says, okay, this is great. You can manage distress, but go back to the hand-holding. But really, if the most potent way to regulate it is really to be connected with somebody who you feel is psychologically connected with you. So it's really, I think these two go hand in hand. We can't immediately have somebody at our beck and call, when we're distressed. We need to learn ways of managing on our own. But fundamentally, we need that secure base that Ainsworth identified with babies. This is the most potent thing to do. So relationships with therapists can help foster that sense of security. But I think most important is the relationship, the key relationships in the person's life, which are going to be fundamentally couple relationships, partners, romantic relationships, and family relationships. So I think family work is enormously important in treatment, because we want to foster security in those key attachment relationships. Therapy can be like a bridge to security in other relationships, and you can't stay on the bridge forever.
That's a good way of putting it. Well, before we close, is there anything you'd like to add?
Okay, well, there is one very important point. If we think about, okay, so the mom or the dad or the romantic partner is charged, in effect, with providing this consistent availability and emotional responsiveness. And by the way, perfection is not needed here. We have the concept of good enough availability, good enough responsiveness, way, way short of perfection. But what does that person need in their life to be able to provide that kind of consistent availability and responsiveness? Well, they need attachment security. This is the crucial thing. So we really need to be secure attachment figures, in a sense, for each other, in order to promote this fundamental state of well-being.
Well, this has been wonderful, so fascinating. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.